Hey guys, I'm John Barklow, and today I want to talk to you about my cardinal rules of the backcountry. So these 6 cardinal rules are things that I've developed over 30 some years of running around the backcountry, 20 plus years of teaching and observing thousands of students, and boiling it down to some really key takeaways that I think could help all of us when we strike out into the wilderness. Now, the first one is to stay as dry as possible and take every advantage to dry out when you can. So what I mean by that is we want to make sure that we're not making ourselves damp. So we want to make sure we have rain gear. We want to make sure that if it starts to snow or rain, that we protect ourselves. We want to make sure that when we get to the top of a ridge and we're completely sweated out, that we take the opportunity to put a puffy jacket on and dry out that base layer. And so if you do this and constantly continue to dry yourself out over time, you're going to find that you're more comfortable and more efficient. So on a Dall sheep hunt in Alaska, I was out for a week by myself, and the first day was great weather, but every day after that, the weather continued to deteriorate, and it went from sunny skies to rain to snow. And every day I would get out of the tent, I would go looking for sheep, fruitlessly I may add, and I would come back and I'd be damp. I'd be damp from walking around in rain gear. And so what I would do is I would strip the rain gear off and I would take advantage of the opportunity to dry out. I would climb in my sleeping bag with the clothes that I had on under that rain gear, and I would dry myself out while I made myself a hot drink. I didn't let myself get cold. I didn't let myself burn too many calories. I tried to dry out as quickly as possible. If I were to take those clothes off and just throw them in my tent, then I would have cold, wet clothes that at some point I still had to put on and dry out. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is always carry a rain jacket and pant and a puffy jacket when you go into the field, even if you're going out for the day. So how many times have we gone out, we're gonna go just out for the day to, say, scout, or we're gonna just poke above timberline and look to see if we can find a mule deer. And that's when that afternoon snowstorm rolls in over the top, or that rain squall comes through, or the temperatures plummet and catch us off guard. And so if you have rain gear and a puffy jacket, you have the ability to, 1, seek shelter. The rain gear is going to protect you from the wind. It's going to protect you from precipitation. And if you have that puffy jacket, it's going to allow you to trap that body heat. And those two in conjunction are going to give you a basic form of warm shelter that you can either stay in place or you can start to slowly work your way back, either closer to camp or closer to the truck. The next rule is that you want to always have the ability to make a shelter. Now, depending on what you're doing, that shelter may be different. So I just talked about clothing is your number 1 shelter. You can put on clothes to protect yourself from the elements. So that could be rain gear, puffy jacket, etc. Maybe you're backpack hunting and you have a tent in your pack. Well, obviously that's an obvious one. Or maybe you're out for the day and you have a tarp. But I'm not talking about having to carry a lot of extra gear. Maybe in your possibles pouch, you just have a knife, some 550 cord, and the knowledge to be able to make an improvised shelter. Whatever it is, make sure that you have the ability to make shelter, because shelter is your number 1 survival priority. The next rule is have the mindset and the attitude that I'm gonna step off from the trailhead and I might not be back for 24 hours. It happens. Don't screw with your mind. How many times you said, I'm gonna go out just for the evening, and that's when you get on that herd of elk that you've been looking for all season, and you dog them to their bed and you're like, man, the best thing for me to do is to sit here and wait for that bull to get up in the morning, and I'm gonna have the wind and I'm gonna be able to kill him. Well, people think you're gonna be back in 6 hours, or you didn't plan to be out overnight, or mentally you're like, man, I gotta rush this. You go in there, you force the opportunity, you blow the bull out, you don't see him again. If you have that mindset like, hey, I'm not gonna be back for 24 hours. I mean, I'd like to be, but if not, I have enough food, I have enough water, I have the clothing, I have the knowledge that I can stay out here. I don't have to push the situation. And oftentimes it's when we get to this point of, I need to do something and try to impose your will or schedule on Mother Nature, that she tends to push back a little bit harder, and that's when bad things happen. The next rule is you always want to try to improve your situation. And what I mean by this is, say you hike in with your buddy and you set up camp in the dark, and then you wake up the next day and you realize, well, you know what, camp's not in the best spot. Maybe it's in a low spot. Take the opportunity to move that camp. Or maybe you're up on a glassy knob and the wind starts to blow, or the rain starts to come in sideways. Take the time to set up the tarp and protect yourself. Always try to improve your situation. Even if you, say, sprain your ankle and you're like, man, I have 2 hours of daylight, I'm still mobile, but I'm not moving as quick. Improve your situation by moving either closer back to camp or the truck if you can, while maybe you've called your friends and they're coming to you. Not only are you improving your situation, but mentally you're making positive steps to help yourself. And so always trying to improve your situation is not just for a survival situation, but anytime we're outdoors, we always want to try to make things better. And lastly, don't become too nutritionally or physically depleted if you can. Now, this is one of the things I struggle with the most. If I have an objective to go from the trailhead to, up over the ridge to get to camp, or my glassy knob or whatever it is, I just want to hammer out those miles. And if it's 3 hours, 4 hours, half a day, whatever it is, I'm probably going to put my head down and not want to stop. And what I've realized over the years is that it's better off to say, hike for 50 minutes and take a 10-minute break. It allows you to dry out that base layer, as I talked about. It allows you to hydrate and eat a little something so that you're not nutritionally depleted. It allows you to look around and do a map study. Maybe you're walking past animal concentrations you didn't even know you were walking past. But if you find yourself in that hole of being physically and nutritionally depleted, and now the broken leg comes in, or your buddy stabs himself while you're quartering up an animal, and you have to go into this crisis type mode of situation, if that happens and you are too far in the metaphorical hole, you may not have the strength, the mental focus, whatever it is, to actually confront this situation that has now been presented to you. And so, again, I've learned from experience that this is not a place to be. We were hiking back from a mountain goat hunt years ago on Kodiak Island. We were really in shape and dialed and professional and knew our stuff. But we did not eat and hydrate the entire day. We ended up killing 2 big billies on the backside of a ridge. And by the time we were nearing camp at midnight that day, having been on our feet for probably 18 hours at that point in time, completely wrung out, my buddy, who's an amazing navigator, was having trouble even figuring out where we were on the map. I knew we were in trouble. And luckily, we did eventually stumble into camp not too long after that. But I had learned my lesson that even the best, if we're too nutritionally and physically depleted, can be put in a hole that you might not be able to fight yourself out of. So again, over 30 years, I've come up with these 6 cardinal rules of the backcountry. And they don't just apply for the hunter. It could be the backcountry skier, the climber. It could be somebody going on a trail run. If you keep these 6 cardinal rules in mind, you are going to be a more capable and competent outdoorsman.